now want to describe to you something which it is very strange when people in my department in Cambridge or in other British universities, American universities, talk about fieldwork to their students. They never talk about the practical elements of how you actually live and participate in fieldwork. They just assume that people will manage perfectly well. But the success of your fieldwork will depend very much on whether you are happy, whether you are healthy, and who you live with. So I'm devoting the next section to living in the field. How do you live? What do you eat? What do you wear? These things, which are never discussed in books, are important. Well, when I first went to Nepal, 1968, we lived in this house here. This is a photograph from that visit. And we cooked here. I had my office up here, and we slept up here. Just a very small house next to another Gurung house here. The question of where you live makes a huge difference to your happiness and success in fieldwork. There are really three main possibilities, and this applies whether you are living in Chengdu and doing fieldwork here or in a remote village like that. One possibility is you live with a family in the same house, sharing everything more or less. That is very good in many ways because you are very close and you experience their life. On the other hand, you have no privacy. You don't probably have much room for your notes and your working space, and you may feel very under pressure by living. Thank you very much. A second possibility is that you live in an entirely separate place, another house away from the village or in another, on your own. The third possibility is what we found was the best, which is to have a little private space of your own, a little house, which is this house, which we built after our second revisit. They suggested that we built a house, and so we paid for it, and they made this little house here. We'll go inside that house in a minute. But the family we were living with lived here. This is their courtyard. So we were an extension of their family. And importantly, they did all the cooking. So we had all our meals in this house. So we were part of a family, and yet we were separate. That is about the ideal situation. And I want to show you now, take you inside the house to see how we lived in this little house. So that is the house, the windows here, looking out across to another rural village on the hill here. Looking down to India. This is the view from our house down towards India, in the bottom of the village. Looking at, this is Sarah working inside the house here. The chickens down below here. This is the yard, and now we're going into the house. medicine cabinet, and then now Sarah from inside. Often we have a spare bed here, and our two workplaces, one desk for Sarah here, one desk for me there. Not very much light, but at least you can spread out all your work things as here, this desk. And our bedroom is through here. We now go into the bedroom. We just have a few simple things, our toothpaste, toothbrushes, our bed here, and that's all that you really need. A place to have a bucket for washing, hanging everything up. We have to be very careful because there are many rats and insects here, so we keep things high up, our batteries and our belongings up here. And other things which rats can eat in this tin trunk here. Of course, there is not total privacy, so you don't worry looking in, watching us inside the house. She's climbed up onto the roof so she can see us from there. And other times, there's always pressure of being watched. I'll talk about this a little more later. The problem of privacy, getting away from people, just looking into the screen and into the camera. I put this in just to show the constant pressure, particularly from children, who always want to be with you. Okay, so perhaps I'll just say a little bit more about privacy. I don't know really whether it's the case with you, but I come from a culture in England where there is a huge stress on privacy, where you have a door between you and the world, or several doors, and you have your own world, and you can shut the door, lock the door, keep everyone out. One of the things that students are not told about when they do field work, usually, very much, is the enormous pressure. If you go to a society like this, or in many parts of the world, the concepts of personal identity and personal privacy and personal space are very different. So that people will just come into your house without asking your permission. They won't even knock on the door. They'll just come in, sit down, start talking to you. And if you're not used to this, in England, if you want to see someone, you ring them up, you make an appointment, you go to their house, you would never, even with your own family, if they live nearby, as our family do, you try to warn them that you are coming in some way, and then they have time to prepare for you, psychologically. Whereas in this society, people are constantly coming in for you. And we found this very, very difficult. Particularly my wife nearly went mad with people just coming in, sitting down, watching her, commenting in a language she couldn't understand on what she was doing. Even when we tried to get away, as we did once a week, to go to a stream and wash and relax, sometimes the villagers would follow us. Interestingly, in this village, they think the saddest thing for a human being is to be alone. So they thought they were being very kind to us, that we would be very lonely on our own. So they followed us to where we were washing and sat with us so that we wouldn't be lonely. And in the evenings, they did the same thing. But of course, that's exactly what we wanted to be, was alone. So privacy is one of the things you have to think about. Another practical matter which isn't really discussed much or at all before people do field work are matters of food and clothing. What do you eat and what do you wear? Now, I'll show you some little films of both these. First is about food. Anthropologists went to many cultures where the food was unfamiliar and often went against what they'd been used to. When we come to China, Sarah and I don't eat pork. And if you come to Chengdu and you don't eat pork, you are in a difficult situation. Since most of you love pork, and you eat a lot of pork. But in more extreme cases, in parts of the world, you will be offered food like little maggots or grubs or bees or rats or the eyes of animals or whatever it is. What do you do when you offer this food? They encounter you offering food. And what I tell my students is, as much as possible, eat the local food. If you bring in lots of foreign food, they will think you are not really part of the community. So eat the local food, particularly the staple foods, rice or maize or whatever it is, and praise the local food. Say this is very delicious, which it is, and you're usually hungry, so you enjoy it. But if there are things you don't want to eat, just say, I am afraid this is against my principles. They understand that, and in all societies have categories of persons, whether it's priests or women who are having a baby or whatever it is, who cannot eat certain foods because it is a matter of principle. So societies understand this. So you just say, look, I am a Buddhist, I don't eat animals like animals. I'm sorry, I can't eat them. It doesn't worry them, it doesn't offend them. So basically be direct with the people and say what you can eat and what you can't eat. But it's, if possible, eat as much of the local food as possible. So here, because eating, we think of eating in the West as something you just do and put food in your mouth. But as you know much better in China, because eating is so central to Chinese civilization, eating together is a social relationship. And spending time with people, as we do in China, eating meals, is a way of cementing. So spending time with the people you're with, eating with them. And that's why I stressed living in a house where every day you eat your meals with the family and with the visitors is very important. So here's a little film of us in our house eating with the family. As you see, we've adopted the way of eating, which is to eat with your hands. When we come to China, we eat with chopsticks. And people are pleased to see that we know how to use chopsticks. Here, you eat with your hands. Of course, you need to know how to eat with your hands. You never eat with your left hand. Always eat with your right hand, because your left hand is what you use when you go to the toilet. So it is a dirty hand, and this is a clean hand. So you should always eat like this, and you put the food very carefully into your mouth, as you'll see. So this is on food.
So colonnade, so
See, they dip the rice into the
in a relaxed way, working out what's going to happen in the day, what has happened in the day, commenting, gossiping in the intensity of the family. And of course, sharing food, which is very strong form of communication. Food.
This is a friend who we went with on one occasion. They give us special foods, quite a lot of different foods, vegetables, maybe a bit of meat, chicken. You eat at different times, of course, in different societies. Here you eat just a tiny little bit at about 7 or 8 o'clock, just a cup of tea and a little snack, and then the main meal at about 10 o'clock, and then the second meal at about 6 or 7, which is what this is in the evening. So 2 meals a day.
It's a very intimate act.
One thing to note is that in this society, and I don't know if it's the case in Tibet or in China, eating is a very private activity, and they don't like to be watched or filmed. One of the things they really don't like. But, so this is very unusual film of my sister, Maya. She's allowing me to film her because she is my sister. This is the way they cook, as you see on an open fire with a tripod. This is found in many parts of the world. In the fire is a god, a little god, to whom you give a little bit of food at the beginning of the meal. And you cook the rice and other vegetables bit by bit here. This is another of our relatives. This is a typical inside of a Gurung house. All this wood has to be cut in the forest and brought down, and you'll see them doing that later. And this is one of the reasons why there's serious problems of deforestation in Nepal, the use of firewood. But as yet, there's no real alternative. They are trying to experiment with things. The fact that it takes a long time to cook in this way is why it's a social event. You sit and watch the food being cooked. Sarah's here trying food, some honey, which we've been given, or in this case some rice with milk. This is the honey. We've watched them collecting this honey from the bees and are trying it out. She's saying, oh, lovely, lean, which means very tasty. You see the expression. Sarah has a very expressive face, luckily. She's really loves honey. So, and one of the big problems, of course, is water. Here I'm using a water filter to filter the water into a water bottle. Slow process, just a little bit at a time, which will last us for one day. Water, most of the diseases that humans suffer from comes through water. Typhoid, dysentery, cholera, and so on, all waterborne diseases. And although you would think living high up in the mountains of the Amazonas, the water would be very pure coming down from the mountains. Of course, in fact, all the streams are polluted by animals who just go to the toilet or die or whatever it is in the streams. So if you examine the water in any of these parts of the mountain areas, they are filled with very dangerous bacteria. And so you have to either boil water for a very long time, about 5 minutes, or have a water filter like this, or drink it as tea, because tea has many antibacterial substances. So if you drink tea, it is safe anywhere in the world. Not only because it is boiled, but because it also has antibacterial substances. So if you are travelling anywhere in places like India or China or whatever, you should try and drink tea. Another question, the topic which isn't explained to our students when they go to do fieldwork is clothing. Now it might seem an obvious thing, you just wear what is comfortable, but there are two things to be particularly remembered. One is that, especially for women, you have to wear appropriate clothing. Short dresses you don't wear in many parts of the world. Anything that exposes too much of your breasts you don't wear in many parts of the world. And secondly, if you dress in local costumes, people accept you and feel you are making an effort to be part of their culture. If you try to continue to wear Western clothes, then you are rejecting the culture. This picture here shows Sarah still wearing fairly Western kinds of clothes, but very soon, as you'll see, she wore what the village women wore, and as a result, they accepted her much more easily. So this is some examples of clothing. So we start with in Western clothing. In an early film, you can see the full quality of the film here. So this is probably about 1988. And this is Sarah choosing some cloth to have made up into How expensive is it, I'm asking? Very cheap, I say. This is a close relative of This is opera.
Deve lunghi pelati. Ciu. Sostenuto.
I'm just going to give this as a present to my sister. And she's been measured up for the dress. So it'll be made by a local tailor. Now we're giving it to my sister. She's giving Sarah a present back. This is a rather special dress. Very, very pretty.
The ritual of a dance
Sarah's been dressed in a special costume, wearing those beads which you find throughout Tibet and this region. It's a very important part of the costume of this. This is quite a formal costume, not what they wear every day. This is one of my students demonstrating the dance that they do, wearing the local costume. This is the more normal costume that Sarah wears, the long dress made of local cloth. Which is fairly convenient for just walking around the fields and being comfortable. I tend to be too lazy and just wear my usual clothes, which now most of the men wear fairly Western clothes as well. You see these little schoolboys. They're quite used to Westerners wandering around like this, but this is the men. We're just visiting another part of the village. Sometimes on special occasions I will wear Gurung costumes. Sleeping. Well, as you know, we spend 1/3 of our lives sleeping, so it's quite important to be comfortable. We take mattresses which we blow up, put underneath the cloth, and there are problems of sleeping in these communities. We're not used to the kinds of noises that you get: dogs barking, chickens, cockerels crowing very early in the morning. So I take earplugs. And also the way they sleep, they tend to sleep downstairs. In my culture, they sleep upstairs. So to get used to sleeping downstairs takes a little bit of time. Very seldom do we explain to our students the problems of actually living day to day, cooking and housework. And because we don't explain it, many students suddenly find they come from a culture where they have good cooking utensils, good stoves, everything they can buy simply in the shop and then cook it very quickly. And the houses are mostly made with quite good materials, so it's quite easy to keep them clean and sweep them and so on. And you go to a community where the floors are made of earth and the walls are not very good, where there are no stoves. And so the consequence is that, certainly on my first field work, we spent an awful lot of time trying to keep the house clean and an awful lot of time cooking. We decided to live on our own, so we did all the cooking. And often field workers find that they're spending 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day just on basic housework, which can be frustrating if you're trying to do field work as well. as I mentioned, we were very fortunate because we lived in that courtyard of my sister Vilmaya Gurung, and she cooked for us, and she also kept our house in order. She put water on our floors, we swept around. But there's also other things which we didn't want her to do, which included washing, keeping clothes clean. So here's a little film on housework. After a meal, there's all the washing up. There's no hot water. So
Korean book. Korean chaba film lava chali.
you have to cook. You have to wash the utensils you've used with ash and cold water. It takes much longer, as you can see. So little Maya's doing all that. This may take half an hour for each meal, so that's an hour a day, just on washing up. So you can see the way she sits. This is a very normal way of sitting for a good squatting. For hours you can sit like that. Just using a bit of grass and some ash on the fire. And of course the pans get very dirty because they've been on the fire, so they're often covered in soot. Then there's washing. Again, there's no hot water, no washing machines, etc. So Vilmaya is doing the family washing, or some of it here. Sometimes they go down to a spring. The soap is very poor quality soap as well, so it's very difficult to keep things clean. And since many of them only have one or two of any piece of clothing, when I took a list of what clothing this family had, each of the children had one or two shirts, one or two trousers or skirts. Vilmaya only had one or two shirts herself, one or two dresses. Tiny amount of clothing. So wear it as long as possible and then wash it, and you only have one change.
Also, we have a machine.
When I say we, I mean Sarah does all our washing by this stream or the well here. Water. Again, this shows you are a village woman. This is what villagers do, and we do the same. But it's quite a lot of work, just that housework.
Washing machines, and water comes. Filter it.
Each household needs an awful amount of water. That pot, a household would need 4 or 5 of those pots a day. As you see, far less than my wisdom. Some of the washing is done inside the house.
Do you want to explain the
Bucket for clean water. Wash ourselves in this dish. And we pour the water into this bucket. We put our clothes into this bucket. And I put a little detergent in here, otherwise it's soap.
This was a scientific method which Sarah worked out after
Every couple of
many
days.
trials. Using 2 buckets
Here.
to do the washing.
the drinking water? How is the drinking water done?
The drinking water is filtered.
Drinking water is separate, obviously. One of the big problems is having enough water in the houses. There's no running water, no pipes until recently. So every day you have to go up to this tap. I did a survey of the amount of time the villagers spent on fetching water when I was first in the village. It was something like an hour a day, just getting enough water. Carrying it, because not only do you need water for drinking and for washing and things like that, but you need a lot of water for the animals. Below our house is a buffalo. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the floors are made of mud, and very soon, particularly if you wear shoes, as we do, we shouldn't do, but we do in our house, the mud gets broken up, and Wilma has to put bits of water on it and repair it every 2 or 3 days. These are the sitting mattress mats. So if we had to do all this work ourselves, along with the cooking, it would take a lot of your fieldwork time doing it. You have to repair also the outside of the house, which the rain and so on gets it. And here bits are falling off, as you see. This is repairing the outside of the house. This is mud mixed with buffalo manure. It looks very simple, but it would have been difficult for us to do this and repair our house. Of course, women have a great burden in these societies. They have to do all the housework, almost all the housework. They do a lot of the field work in the fields and fetching wood and so on. And they also have to look after the children and have babies and so on. So it's a huge pressure. And as I'll mention later, the pressure was so great that this lady, my sister, my closest friend here, died at the age of 42 from overwork and exhaustion and also a heart complaint. So it's a really difficult life for women, as I explained in the book which I've written about it. Another subject which is almost taboo to talk about when we train our field workers, or 2 subjects. One is toilets. I can't remember anywhere in any book on anthropology ever anyone describing the problems of what you do about toilets in field work. And yet, it can be very important. On my first field work, for instance, the houses don't have separate toilets. You know what I mean by toilet? You know what a toilet is? Yes? Restroom? Lavatory? Latrine? You know? Yeah? No one seems to know what a toilet is. You know? Children? What is the Chinese word? Okay, so. Okay, those are euphemisms for a toilet. So basically, on my first field work, there were no restrooms, no toilets, and so I was too shy to ask about this. So we used to walk up out of the village, right up the mountainside, and this took an awful lot of time. It took about 20 minutes to walk up, like half a mile up the hillside. And after a while, we got a bucket and put it in the house. But that bucket had to be emptied, and sometimes you needed to, you wanted to go up to the toilet after. So I wasted an awful lot of time and was quite embarrassed. Later, on the second field work with Sarah, we saw that a number of houses now had built little holes in the ground with some planks over. So we built one of those with a protection around it. And that saved a huge amount of time and was much more convenient because they were near the house. So such practical things make a huge difference to fieldwork. Likewise, something which is not discussed is the problem of women's periods. Now again, I don't know what the Chinese word for period is. Do you know what I'm meaning? Period? Menstruation is another word. What is the Chinese word for it? Do you know what I mean? When women have blood coming out of them every month. Okay? Well, it's difficult for women. In this village, they didn't have any kind of device to stop the blood. So it would just come out, and they would sometimes wear a piece of cloth. And so it was quite difficult for women in the society, but it's also difficult if you are a field worker and you're going to quite a remote area. So you have to think in advance about what you are going to do about this. So there's that, and then there's another subject which is not discussed much before our students go, which is health and medicine. It's very important that you keep as well as possible. If you get disease when you are in a remote area working, then you can become very depressed, and it can be quite dangerous as well. So it's very important, as I mentioned, to make sure you make the water as pure as possible, but also that you have some medicines, that you have all the protection you can before, and you work out what you will do if you are ill. When I first went to the field, my first wife was very ill. She had amoebic dysentery, which is a bad form of dysentery, which makes you very depressed. And we had coughs and colds and lots of diseases. So it's important to think about health. There are other difficulties. Here is my foot. You can see this foot here is mine, and here is a leech. Do you know what a leech is? Yeah. Yes? Yes. Little creature that goes along like this, and it sucks your blood. Okay? So here is one of them. So this is a film about health and disease. about to eat me. The fight might be on. Also, like a very still meat, isn't doing very much. Welcome.
Wages, and of course, you often look at.
My sister demonstrating this. You get into trouble in the website. This is a local shaman, and I'd hurt my finger here, and so this man is seeing what he can do about curing my finger with this magical spell. I'll talk about this later, but the fact that I was prepared to go to a local healer, a local witch doctor, and here I am. I don't have much film of me being ill, so I'm stopping it for the moment. Here's our bed here. Here's a roll of toilet paper because I've got a very, very bad cold. Often when you come from one culture to another, you're not used to the various illnesses and diseases that they have. And so for the first few times we went to Nepal, Sarah and I got very, very bad colds and were exhausted. So here I'm just trying to recover and sleep. I haven't got much film of me anymore, but I'll show you film of some of the people themselves. I talked about personal space and privacy. We don't talk much to our students about loneliness, homesickness, and friendship. One of the most difficult parts of fieldwork is that you miss your own culture, your own society, all the things you've taken for granted. The radio, television, certain foods, conversations, understanding the culture are lost. You were in a place where you were a stranger, and you could feel very, very lonely and very homesick. I love England, and when I'm away from England for a long time, I feel homesick. Though strangely enough, when I come to China, I don't really feel homesick. I'm still not here for too long, but China feels very familiar, and people are so kind to us here, but we don't really feel homesick even 5 or 6 weeks. But if you go away for 6 months or a year, you're bound to have periods when you're desperately wanting to be at home. And this was my experience. We got so homesick that, and we were there, I was there for over a year on the first visit, that every day we would take a walk at the end of the day, and I would pick up a stone, and I would put it on a little pile, and watch the pile getting bigger and bigger, and know that yet another day had passed. And then towards the end, we arranged the stones so there were 30 or 40 days to go, and each day we would take one stone away, another stone away, only 20 days, only 15 days, only 10 days. Time seemed to pass very slowly at times. But one of the ways to overcome this is through friendship. And many anthropologists have realized that you can make really deep friendships in another culture. 1 or 2 of my best friends are Nepalese, and likewise when we come to China now we have some really good friends and that helps to deal with loneliness. Another problem is identity. Our identities are shaped in our own cultures. We know who we are. We are English or British or Chinese or whatever. What happens in fieldwork, which is not often explained to students, is that your identity is challenged. Your identity as a woman is challenged. Your identity as a man is challenged. Everything about what you have taken for granted about who you are is challenged from outside. And it can be very undermining. People can say, well, I don't agree with anything you say, or the basis of your civilization or anything else. They can either say it or they can imply it by what they do. And therefore, preserving your identity is very important. On the other hand, as I'll talk about later, the difficulty of anthropology is that you must lose your identity somewhat. If you just remain purely of your own culture when you go to another culture, you will learn nothing. So you have to be prepared to reject, or at least temporarily suspend parts of your identity to fit with another culture. Otherwise you will learn nothing, as I say. And therefore, keeping a balance between knowing who you are and yet being a member of another culture is very difficult and tricky, and I write about it in this book. I should mention, someone asked if they could have a copy of what I'm talking to you about. It is in fact going to be a book, Fieldwork with Gurungs. So all that you see here will one day be an available PDF with the films included. But it isn't ready yet, it hasn't been checked. So during the course of the project, which we have here in Sichuan University, we will make a copy of this available for you. But we can't do that yet. But in the book I describe the problems of loneliness and so on. Another question which isn't discussed much but is important is, if you go to a remote area such as the one you went to, or anywhere in the world as a fieldwork camp, how do you deal with your visitors who come to see you from outside? It can be quite difficult because you have established many social relationships in the community you're working with, and then suddenly your mother comes, or some close friend comes, and it can make everything unbalanced, suddenly throws everything into confusion. So what do? Or your professor comes, he says, I would like to come and see you in the field. Well, all sorts of things may be changed by that. So what I advise, and what I've done in the past, is that if someone says they would like to come and see you in the field, if they just want to come for a day or two, that's fine. If they want to come for longer, you say, well, it may be difficult. Come and see me for a day or two, and then let's go and visit some other villages together. You don't have to be in my village. And it would be interesting for me to see some other villages, for you to see the culture through your eyes. And so you spend a week or 2 weeks, or whatever time you have, travelling around in neighbouring villages. But don't spend it all in your own village, because it may lead to complications. Another thing that sometimes students ask about, if I am in a long-term relationship with someone before I go to do fieldwork, is it a good idea that we go together? There are arguments for and against doing that. In the case of my fieldwork with Sarah, it's made a huge, huge difference that we go together. Sarah does a lot of the work. She does the photography, She gathers the census, she keeps the field diary, she does most of the day-to-day anthropological detail fieldwork, while I do the filming and I think about the wider issues and do little small projects. So it is a perfect relationship, and some of the great anthropologists like Margaret Mead did her fieldwork with her husband. She married several times, Gregory Basin, Rita Fortune and so on. So there have been many well-known anthropological partnerships of a husband and a wife, or a man with his girlfriend or whatever, going to the field. On the other hand, I also warn my students that going to do fieldwork with your partner, your long-term friend, can lead to serious problems. When you are with someone here in Chengdu, you hardly see them. You know from our friends, professors here, their husbands are over there, they're over here, rushing around, and occasionally they meet and then they shoot off in different directions. And it's the same with you. You may be on the mobile phone to them, your partner, but they're doing one thing, you're doing another thing. So you spend a few hours together. When you go to a place like this, you are together the whole time. There is no one else. You're totally dependent on each other. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, you are together. That means that if you don't get on very well, if there are small difficulties in the relationship, they will become very big. After 3 or 4 months with someone, if you don't like the way in which they eat, or you are fed up with listening to their jokes, or whatever, the relationship will come under severe strain. And I've noticed with my students, a number of them, their relationships have broken up after they've done fieldwork. And indeed this happened in my case after my first fieldwork. I separated from my first wife. But with Sarah, who is a wonderful field worker, it's made it much richer. So you have to think carefully about whether you go with anyone to do your field work. This is another thing that's very important to think about in fieldwork. It's very, very difficult. It's one of the most difficult things you can do in fieldwork, and I'll explain in future talks. Partly because you never stop. If you are working in a Western or Chinese society, you have your work and then you have your rest. You're in the library, you're doing your lessons, and then you go off and you do something restful. When you're doing field work, you are doing field work all the time. It never stops. There is no boundary to it. All the time, something interesting may happen, someone may need you. So you are being watched and you are watching all your waking hours. And you don't understand the language properly. You don't know if you're making mistakes. You are perhaps anxious, you are perhaps homesick, and you're perhaps not very well at times. So you can get exhausted very quickly and easily when you're doing field work. So I always say to my students, and I myself do this, and Sarah and I do this, after about 3 or 4 weeks, go away for a day or two, just anywhere. Local town, Pokhara, or to another village, if there's an interesting thing. Just get away from the constant pressure. And then do that every 3 or 4 weeks. Then every 3 or 4 months, have a proper holiday. Go away for 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, maybe to Kathmandu or to a city where you are anonymous, no one knows you, and you can rest properly. It's very important for your mental health, but also it's a place where you can think and get your work into perspective. You can start making some notes, start thinking about how you will write your thesis or book. And so you need real rest and relaxation. Also, it's worth going to another village or two, or another area similar to the one you're studying. So if you were studying in Chengdu, I had a student, for example, or I have a friend and student who worked in Hangzhou, and she was studying gay bars. You know what a gay bar is? Yes. Homosexuals, where they meet. So she was studying a homosexual bar in Hangzhou. But I said to her that in order to see whether there was something special about this particular bar, she should go to another city, maybe Chengdu. Maybe you have good gay bars in Chengdu, I don't know. She should go to another place so she can get some sense of comparison. And it's the same with fieldwork. You should go to another village for maybe a week or two, so you can see what is special about your community and what is general. So, when I was first in Nepal, the village, as you saw, was very primitive, but the Germans had built a research institute in Kathmandu, and I had permission to go here. So we went here, and it was just wonderful. There was good food, there was a library, there was a bath. We just relaxed, and that was enormously helpful. Choosing your friends. When you go to a community, people will decide, well, they will choose you. They will say, well, here is a foreigner, he may have some money, he may have some useful contacts, and they will start being friendly with you. But they may not be the best people for you to be close friends with, because they will be from a certain group in the community. And if you become friends with them, you will not become friends with other groups. There is a famous article describing this in the Himalayas by someone called Gurungs. And he discovered this because he had someone who was a fieldwork assistant, someone who was helping him with the language and translation. And this person was from the upper group of the society. He was a Brahmin, which is the top level in the Indian society. And so he thought he would study the village. That was fine, he would meet many people and do his study. Then this man left, couldn't stay. So he got another fieldwork assistant who was from the lowest group in the village. He suddenly realized there was an entirely different village, which he had never met, never encountered, because it was thought he was from the upper caste, and now he was from the lower caste. So what you need to do is to work out roughly what the social status of various groups in the village is, and try to make friends from people in different groups. Fortunately, I was able to do that in the Gurung village. So I am adopted into different families, some from the top, some lower down. So I have access to people right through the Gurung society. But it's very easy to be just friends with one group and not with others. And then there's finally the question of whether you return to the area where you've done your work. We have found it very, very valuable to go back. If you go once to a place, people think, well, we'll never see these people again. You are, in a way, one-dimensional. They've seen you at one point in history. They don't know anything about your past. If you come back again, suddenly they knew you before, they know you now, they know that you care about the place that you come back to, and you have some joint history. You can remember things that happened on your last visit. This happens in Nepal, where we go back and back and back and back, and this is now beginning to happen in Chengdu, Sichuan University. We came to Sichuan and Chengdu 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and this is our 4th or 5th visit. Each time we make new friends and our relationship gets deeper, and it's the same with returning. You also get a sense of change. If you go to a place once, you think it's always been like that, it's unchanging. But if you keep coming back, you see the immense changes that occur. Chengdu now is a totally different city from Chengdu we came to 10 years ago. Every year you come back, very, very different. So you get that sense if you return to the village or this town. So these are just photographs. That's something on how you live. And in the last 20 minutes, I'll just take us on to one further matter, which is how you communicate. When you go to a community like this, very often you won't speak the language. And even if you speak the language a little, you won't be able to communicate all sorts of deeper things. So how do you learn to communicate in a place like this? In our case, when I first went there was no grammar, no dictionary, I couldn't do any preparation. I arrived knowing nothing. So how do you begin to communicate? Obviously, the first thing is to try and learn the language. So this is part of the notes I took with the English with Nepali and with the local language Gurung, which is a Tibeto-Burman language different from Nepali. And so I would have an English word like gentle, and then the Nepali, and then description and the Gurung words. I also began to make a list of useful phrases which we learned. So, the greeting in this area is, have you eaten rice? You meet someone walking on a path. You don't say ni hao or hello or anything. You say, have you eaten rice? Can sign more. Okay, it's a tonal language like Chinese. So K is word, K is wind, and K is rice. Sai is past tense of to eat, sawa. Wa is the past tense of have you. So have you eaten rice? Ke sai wa. No, I have not eaten rice. At sai mu. What do you want? Kito saidim. What time is it? Koti goti. Goti is time. Koti is how much. What are you doing? Tolala. So basically we learnt numbers, phrases, and so on. There are various ways of communicating. One I found very useful was to take a guitar, and this is me, 1968, 69, doing one of my Elvis Presley impersonations in the village with my guitar in our house. We used to have sing-songs. It was very strange because I sang various songs and taught them various songs in 1968. When I went back 16 years later, they were still singing these songs that I taught them. So if some anthropologists had come there, they would have thought that they had found a strange group who sang American pop songs. There's a question of whether you have a professional fieldwork assistant who often will act as translator and so on. And some early anthropologists did this. I didn't have the money, and nor did I think it was a particularly good idea, so I had lots of assistants. If I needed help with rituals, I would find an expert in rituals. If I needed help about child matters, I would find a woman to help me with that. Of course, there are big problems of communication between men and women. In many societies of the world, most societies of the world, men and women are kept apart. So a man cannot really easily talk to women, certainly unmarried women, or away from being watched. Fortunately, this society was one where men and women have a very equal relationship, rather like Tibet, and to a considerable extent now like China. So it was very easy for me to communicate with women and for Sarah to communicate with men. There is a question also when you arrive of who you say you are, the presentation of the self in everyday life, which is the title of Hannah's book by Erwin Goffman. Because if you say you are going to who you are and what you're going to do in a long way, the whole society will close up and won't talk to you. You shouldn't say you're studying politics, obviously. So I said I was someone from a distant land who wanted to learn about the culture and the history of this group so that I could make their way of life better known in my own society. I was curious about it, I was interested in it, and I would like the world to know how you live, and also to record your customs and history for the future. So they seem to find that acceptable and to understand it. It was helpful for me because these were people who had been recruited, as I mentioned, into the British Army, and therefore they understood something about Britain, something had been to Britain, they knew about the British Empire, and I just seemed like yet another foreign, visiting, army person. The easiest person for people to learn from are children. Children, firstly, they have more time. Secondly, they speak more simply. Thirdly, they will form a bond with you much more easily than adults. So here is a little bit of film of Sarah learning Gurung language from my niece.
Naga nie Yava.
To explain chicken. And she's going to learn the fingers of the hand, what they're called. It's the same in Chinese. This is mother finger, or this one, mother finger, sister finger, and so on.
You are so your country. Your country. You are so you are so
Mother finger.
your so
And if the parents see that their children like you, then they feel easier about becoming friends with you. The old game of tickling and the old way children try and distract your attention by pointing at something that's important that's going on to stop you tickling them. Spending time with children. So, children are wonderful, of course, and much of their communication is non-verbal, so it's very easy to communicate with them. If you can have bodily contact, again, with children or others, mutual grooming, washing each other's hair, for example, as here, washing the real hair and the mum. And having your hair washed. This is a very unusual film because in most societies for a woman to wash another man's hair, a non-relative, although I was her adopted brother, would be taboo, completely taboo. But we knew each other very well by this time. And her only problem was, as she said, that I didn't have any hair to wash. Or very little. So that's not a way of communicating through. Then there's attempts to hold conversations when you hardly know any of the language, largely through gestures, as in this film. Me talking to Dilmaya, talking to the shaman, and then the next section takes us to participation. Tomorrow, for those of you who would like to come again, we're going to find out how many of you would like to continue this journey. We take you into the heart of the village and the heart of fieldwork, which is called the participant observation method. Actually, being a member of a community by participating in what they do and observing them, watching them, and recording their lives. So tomorrow will be about those processes. Now that we've taken you to that village, we don't, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you've had enough of